Jason, would you tell us what is your background?
Well, you said sometimes people have a direct line into working in agriculture. Mine definitely was not. I grew up on a small farm in Indiana, so we had, I grew up on a pecan orchard, alfalfa, mixed vegetables. It's not a working farm; it's just more of a hobby farm that my father had. So I have a little bit of background as far as like growing up on a farm, doing some farm chores, but not in a family that relied on it as their main business or source of income. Um, yeah, so yeah, growing up, I had a little background. I ended up going into the military after college, and so I had no plans on getting into agriculture at all. I got my master's in economics and mostly for the business side. So it was managerial economics, kind of like a mix between MBA program and pure economics. So that got me interested in the business side after the military. I ran a couple of my own personal businesses, mostly doing like regional distribution businesses for like some sales companies. And then I decided to come back to school here at NMSU. There's two programs here that were of interest to me. So I joined both the Doctor of Economic Development through the Business College here, and as well as the Water Science and Management PhD program in the College of Agriculture. So that was like my first step into agriculture, was doing water economics and policy PhD. Um, Again, really not expecting to be in agriculture, but towards the end of like my programs, a position opened up here at NMSU in extension. And because I knew some of the people in the department, and I had done an internship with one of the professors here, doing like community economic development, which had a lot of agricultural components to it. That was kind of like my first foray into kind of seeing the ag side of economics and business management. So I've been here with extension for a year. It'll be 2 years in July, still pretty fresh, learning a lot of stuff. For Wilda, if you don't know what extension is, and for anybody else that just has heard, maybe never heard of it or heard it but doesn't really know what it is, extension is every state in the United States has a university that is a land grant university. What that means is like that 100 years ago plus, the federal government gave land to these universities, and one of the things that they said was, we're going to give you all this land to be able to do teaching and research and all this, but also we want you to go out into your communities, the stakeholders, your state, and provide them with resources as well. And it was all agricultural based to begin with. And so extension is like teaching classes, but not in a formal 4 credit setting that you have at a university classes. It's more like pretty informal with people that are not students. They're kind of, they're working in their business, or they're doing something, and they want to learn some kind of like through some kind of non-formal education, how to do professional development or personal development. So extension goes all the way from like 4-H and doing youth development, family and consumer sciences, economics, production and agriculture, with some other stuff. So I'm in the agricultural focused economics part of extension. So I do a lot of workshops all over the state with everybody from cattle producers to like really small backyard farmers that want to maybe turn their backyard garden into maybe a business, selling at farmers markets or stuff like that. I provide a lot of business development workshops in person, and then also I do webinars whenever I can't travel that much. And then a lot of it is just making connections in the state, finding out what our producers, whether they're farmers or ranchers, what kind of resources that they need when it comes to business development, or maybe ideas with marketing so they can expand their marketing, increase their revenues, increase like the places where they are selling their products, or maybe even looking at some value added opportunities with their own products. So that's kind of extension. It's just like non-formal education. Um, so that's my background, and I'm pretty
That's
fresh. So
awesome.
Yeah, so there's a lot that I'm still learning, which is great. In agriculture, it's a lot different than other businesses, especially because of the production cycle in agriculture versus like retail businesses or other things like that. So I've learned quite a bit, but here in New Mexico, where we have a ton of people that live in rural areas that are really tied to agriculture, it's really important for our state to make sure that our producers have those resources so that they can compete with bigger states that have that produce a lot more or maybe are like better positioned for in markets and stuff like that. So New Mexico is trying our best to support our farmers and ranchers.
It sounded like, you went from yeah, being on farm and then military and then sort of a formal like business and economics framework, and you have, and like you mentioned, like distribution, and so having all of these frameworks that you pulled in and how to be organized from these other institutions or other knowledge sources, and now you can apply it to, like you said, supporting New Mexico farmers and ranchers to be able to compete and have the systems in place to support them. So it's really cool how it sounds like your background, even if it wasn't direct, all informs what you do now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, and anybody that is not familiar with agriculture, I mean, don't be scared to take an internship or get a job or get closer to it because a lot of it, unless you're really on the farm doing the production side of it, it's just like any other like business or industry. Especially when it comes to like marketing, advertising, supply chain type of stuff, it's pretty much the same as most businesses until you get right on the farm with the actual production part of it. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's such a great point. And I think so often people who are interested in agriculture often are interested in the farming side, and I certainly have heard a lot of people find an immediate challenge that what they want to be doing is farming, but what they actually need to be doing is running a business
yeah.
in order to uh, support their livelihood. Anyway, so it's great that you people like you have get paid to help people figure out that transition. Nice. So you've already touched on some of this, but everyone in agriculture seems to wear many hats. So, and you mentioned you like travel, you run webinars, you're also providing technical support. But what are some of the things that you do professionally related to agriculture?
So some of the things that I do most to build my own personal development is learn how the production of every crop and livestock product, food and fiber product in the state happens. So that would be, so for instance, 2 weeks ago, I was up in Cimarron, New Mexico, taking an orchard management class because I just needed to know what people that grow apples and pears and cherries and all these different things. What are the things that go into their business? How many trees per acre? How long does it take to get a tree from planted from a graft plant all the way up to being bearing fruit? What kind of labor is involved with that? Where do they take that? What kind of maintenance is involved with an orchard? Um, and then after that, it's like, where are their markets? Are they selling at local markets? Are they going to? So it's everything from going down to the nitty gritty of like, what kind of soil are you using, and like, how long does it take for this plant to grow, all the way up to the like, okay, are you forming cooperatives in order to cut costs in your industry? So do you have any regional resources where you are aggregating your products that way a bunch of smaller farmers can sell to larger markets, or are you selling like direct sales at farmers markets and stuff like that? So yeah, as far as like professionally related, it's a really broad thing from like doing financial documents all the way going down and like learning about like pest control. So for me, my professional like spectrum of agriculture is like pretty wide. And then even beyond that, it goes sometimes, especially now when it's like tariffs and policy and regulation type stuff, then it goes way beyond like the individual farms, and we're looking at like geopolitical type stuff that affects the individual farmers.
yeah, so not much, but it sounds like, if somebody is interested in a career in agriculture and really wants to be doing something different a lot, that there are places and there are professions where you are like one day you're thinking about tariffs and another day you're learning about orchards. Like those
Yep,
jobs do exist,
they do.
um, which is pretty cool.
No, I,
um,
I made a list because I was like trying to prepare for this. And I was like, let me think of like all the things that I am involved with professionally, like what I need to know about. And I'll just list them off because they kind of show, they highlight like that really broad reaching of like what my job specifically as a ag economist and business developer is, all the way to like specific jobs within agriculture that are all related. So one of them, it would be financial management and risk analysis. So that's like you could be everything from like farm insurance to doing actuarial type stuff. The other one would be market outlooks and price forecasting. So that's I do a lot of that too. And again, those are right now with tariffs, so they're very general because we don't really know. There's not a good way to do outlooks when there's so much instability when it comes to our markets right now, tariff wise. Farm bill and policy analysis. So that could be how state governments support the farmers all the way up to the federal government, and then policies again like geopolitical type stuff through our trade partners. Drought and water resource management. So I started out as a water economist. Is kind of how I got, I guess, my foot into ag because you can't have ag without water. Um, so yeah, just understanding water policy and actual physical water infrastructure when it comes to irrigation, groundwater systems, all that type of stuff. So there's like the water side of agriculture, supply chain and input cost management. So that is again looking at it could be if we're importing fertilizers from Canada and there's a tariff. Now we're having to like look at our supply chains and maybe reconfigure them to get them from somewhere else or produce them domestically, something like that. Uh, Value added agriculture and direct marketing. Again, that's kind of more like how are we getting our products from New Mexico specifically sold to New Mexicans or sent somewhere else or packaged up and adding some value to them here in the state rather than just sending our products somewhere else to get processed. Labor and workforce management, again, geopolitical things when it comes to H-2A visas and all the different kinds of programs, minimum wage challenges when it comes to local and county and state um, um, uh, regulatory stuff for labor, renewable energy and carbon markets, especially I think some of the businesses that I've seen that are like most on top of this is the dairy industry. They're very, very good at capturing revenue from everywhere that they can. So they're kind of on the top like business level when it comes to like carbon markets. But now there's a lot more like agrivoltaics and a lot of newer. I just thinking about like farmland that can also be used for energy production. Precision agriculture and technology adoption. So it can be like mechanized chili harvesting is a big one that we're working on at MSU. So you got to figure out how is that going to affect the people that work in the farms, the costs associated with having to buy mechanized harvesters when everybody else is doing that, the chili strains that you have to start growing, the varieties that you have to grow. And then the other part was disaster preparedness and farm resilience planning. So that could be everything from like making sure you have the right insurance all the way to like succession and transition planning. Like if you're retiring and you're going to sell your farm, give it to your kids, or any of the other variations of like how that farmland and that production capability gets passed from one entity to the next. So those are like the 10 things that I was like, I work a little bit in every single one of those categories as an economist, but every single one of those also has specialists that work in them too.
Yeah, that is wild. I mean, one thing I have loved about getting involved in the food system is you we just need so many people to come together to learn about and address changes and uh and think about where we want to be and how we get there. It's amazing how diverse of a group of people you can get into a room all talking about, chili. It's really cool. Awesome. What motivates you in your work, and how does your work align with your interests and values?
What motivates me?
Yeah.
Just knowing that as like an underdog state, I would say that New Mexico is typically seen as like, we're not an economic powerhouse. We're kind of, when it comes to a lot of the things as far as like population, education, resources. We always seem to be a small state that can punch above our weight because we have a lot of innovation, and we have a lot of hardworking people. Like a really long history of culture when it comes to agriculture, especially in the state, especially when you're talking about the indigenous areas and some of the infrastructure or institutions we have in place, like the Sakias up north, when it comes to water management. So we have just like a lot of, I don't know, cool culture around our agriculture in New Mexico. And I think that, yeah, I think that we do a good job for being like a kind of an underdog in a place that not a lot of stuff grows and maybe shouldn't be growing. But we happen to, be pretty productive besides,
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Of like, I want to support, I want to support these people to like keep
Yeah.
going and keep
Yeah.
impressing other people.
You
Uh,
also mentioned what does it align with my interests and values? I
yeah.
do really like living in a state that has a lot of public land as well. So that to me, especially when it comes to the ranching side and ranchers having grazing leases on federal and state lands, that it's pretty unique compared to like the farther east you go, the more private property there is, and New Mexico has a pretty good amount of public property that takes it has some unique challenges when it comes to managing federal and state lands and allow it to be multi-use for grazing and recreation and all those other things. So my interest is like conserving that public land, making sure it's used to the best of its abilities, but also sustainably. That way it can be enjoyed for all those multi-uses.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. It sort of, it's a complex, uh, situation. And it's sort of like, it sounds like that's like that complexity is sounds exciting for you rather than like daunting.
Yeah.
So,
It's both.
okay. Fair. Both.
Yeah.
Um, how did you get your position?
Um, so I guess the position was formed when farmers and ranchers went to the state legislature and said that they needed more support because we had a few retirements from the where I'm in the ag business department. And there was several people that retired at the beginning of COVID, I believe,
Mhm.
and they were responsible for doing some things like livestock marketing information, enterprise budgets for crops and livestock. And after they retired, those positions were vacant for a while.
Mhm.
And the farmers and ranchers rely on the products that we produce here for a bunch of different reasons. One of them specifically is like enterprise budgets. If you're going to go get like a loan from a bank for agriculture, and they want to see kind of like what your business plan is, and they want to see it compared to a a I guess a peer reviewed and fully critiqued enterprise budget for that type of production. That way, they know if they're giving out a loan. I mean, most of the lenders that are familiar with agriculture kind of know that stuff anyway. But it really helps to have that information that the data that the university compiles and puts them out into these budgets. And as well as for like marketing stuff, they want to know like uh, what should we be getting into some other crop? Should we be diversifying? Should we adopt a new technology? And a lot of what NMSU does is come up with, I guess, answers. We'll say answers to the best of our ability in that. And when there was kind of like that void because of those retirements, the farmers and ranchers were very vocal in the legislature to get those positions replaced. So 2 years ago, I think they must have they put out they created three positions and had them funded through the state legislature. And then I put in my application, and I got one of one of the positions. So one of them, I'm more of like along the line of marketing and forecasting. Then there's somebody else that does specifically the enterprise budgets, and then there's somebody else hired to help with the value added type stuff.
Cool.
So
Nice. And it sounded like you were already there and you knew about them because you were doing the water work from what you were talking
yeah,
about
my
before.
advisor for
Yeah.
my doctorate was here in the department already. So I've been
Yeah.
working with him in my internship for like at least 6 months, and then I was his research assistant for another year, maybe a year and a half. So they kind of knew me. They knew my work product as a student, and then they kind of knew that it wouldn't be such a huge leap for me to go from regular economic community economic development and water economics and policy to the ag side. So I think they felt comfortable, even though I'm not a professional in agriculture, that I was close to it. I understood it, and it wouldn't be too much of a leap for me to move into a very agricultural focused position. The other people that were hired, they had a much much more robust background in agriculture than me. But it's possible to get a job in ag even if you don't have that specific knowledge base.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point is one, like the connections you make as a student can really help, and that you shouldn't be afraid to apply for things because the skills you have and the things you've developed, um, like can transfer, and then there's so much you learn while you're
Yeah.
actually doing your job.
And I didn't know about extension either. I didn't know what extension was. I'd probably heard the word before and had a vague idea. But it was like a perfect perfect job situation for me because I love traveling, especially around the state. I like teaching classes, but I like the non-formal. I kind of saw myself being, a regular academic professor and researcher. But extension kind of takes the best of both worlds and squishes them together. So I get to teach classes still, but in like a very non-formal. I don't have to grade papers because I'm just there providing information and having discussions rather than, doing quizzes. And then I still get to do like some soft research, we'll say. It's not like the peer-reviewed journal stuff that other researchers have to do, but I still have to, create publications that are, thoroughly reviewed and provide the information that it needs to the stakeholders in the state at a level that's like way below like an academic publication. They don't need a bunch of like statistical analysis. They kind of need to have like like in layman's terms, like what are some suggestions for their businesses in the industry.
Yeah, it sounds like you're taking the tools at the ivory tower level and you're communicating them and you're like figuring out how to make that information and those processes useful and relevant. Does that
Mhm.
sound fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it is interpreting things that kind of would be useless for a farmer or rancher and turning it into something that's a more useful tool.
Cool. Very cool. Um, so that was sort of the questions that are sort of the bigger picture. We can always come back to things. But the next set of questions are a little bit more about like what is your actual day-to-day life like? And you've sort of already prefaced or hinted at one. So this one's like sort of a three-parter. In your job, how much of your time are you at a computer? How much are you on the road? And how much time do you get to spend outside?
So at my computer, I don't know, whenever I'm not outside or on the computer. Yeah, with extension especially, I get the chance to travel pretty often. So I'd say anywhere from like 3, 4 days a month to 2 weeks out of the month, just depending on what time of year it is, how many conferences are going on, what kind of workshops are going on around the state. So I do get to travel like a fair amount, and then I get to go pretty much everywhere. Just in the last year and a half, I've probably been to every single county in the state. I've gone to some conferences in Texas, in Arizona, in Colorado. So I get to do stuff a little bit outside of the state as well. So it's nice to do that. One, because you get a little bit of experience seeing New Mexico is pretty diverse when it comes to the areas and the specific um, differences, like as far as like very arid southern New Mexico versus like Union County or something up north where they have like you know grass this high and cows every like they can have a cow every couple acres. Here it's like a cow every 150 acres. It's good to see that, to be able to travel, because you have to see that and understand that diversity. And then also other things would be just like working on tribal or on trust land. If you're working like with Navajo Nation versus like ranchers that are on like private land, so then you have to be able to travel to see how people um, do their run their businesses differently in those different circumstances. So you really have to travel as an extension agent to do that and to do it well, because you got to do a lot of face-to-face stuff. And whenever there's conferences, you got to be there to meet everybody and kind of like understand the people that work within those industries, and you can't really get the same thing over Zoom or over phone calls. So I do a lot of in-person workshops or just showing up for different things. And I get to be a student a lot of the time, which is really nice. I get to learn a lot. um how much time do I spend outdoors? I do a lot of conference stuff, but I'd say every couple of months I'll do a workshop outside. And so that could be in the summertime. I do a youth ranch management workshop up in Cimarron, New Mexico. So it's like beautiful weather, right up against the mountains at this great ranch. So I spend like an entire week with high school students, and we do everything from like meat, like going to a meat processing plant, doing ranch plans, doing rangeland management, and like calculations for like grazing, all the way to like wildlife management, water resource management. So that's a really cool opportunity to do that. Um, I mentioned that I was at an orchard management workshop. So I was like 2 days up at, and that's in Cimarron, New Mexico too, at the Philmont Scout Ranch. I got
Okay.
to be a Boy Scout and learn how to prune trees. Um, and then yeah, it just as an extension agent, we have NMSU has I believe 11 or 12 agricultural experiment stations across the state. So I've been to every single one of those, and that's where we do all our research. And generally, every year or two, they'll have a field day. So I go to those to see what kind of research that they're doing at each one of those ag experiment stations. So again, that's a really good opportunity for me to go. The local producers usually go to those field days because they want to learn what's going on. They want to give their feedback to like what their needs are to those local experiment stations. So I get to be out there riding a tractor around and actually walking out in the fields and doing sweep nets to look to like learn about the pests, and then we have pest management workshops. Sometimes I was just in Santa Teresa like a few months ago at the cattle crossing. So we have like the largest cattle crossing in the world, I believe, is or at least in the United States, is just south of Las Cruces. So going out there and seeing cattle crossing from the Mexican side to the U.S. side. So I'm outside quite a bit, wearing my cowboy hat and pretending I'm on a farm or a ranch somewhere. But then yeah, the other times I'm inside on my computer, and of course there's always things that I have to publish and emails that you have to check. But it's a pretty good. I think almost everybody in agriculture gets to do some outside stuff, unless you're specifically like, doing your agricultural lender, you're doing financing or something like that. I think most people will have a good blend of like office work as well as field work when it comes to like agricultural careers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, and it's interesting to just hear, there's some people where that much travel actually might be challenging if they're caregiving or something, and some people that will be such a benefit to a job is getting to. I don't think I've been to every county in New Mexico. I'm like, I want to go to every county in New Mexico. That's awesome. Nice. Okay, so this is a two-part question. What kinds of vacations do you get to take, and how much flexibility do you have? Or what else is important to you about work-life balance? Because I know not everyone actually cares about vacations, but some people do. So, yeah.
Well, I'd say one thing about working in the university system is that you do get some nice vacations. I am a 12-month faculty, so I do not get like a long summer break. But I get breaks. I get spring break. I get winter break. I get my weekends off. So that's nice. I and then at least working in the state of New Mexico, I think that we have maybe UNM probably has a similar schedule. We have whatever holidays we get
Yeah,
off
I think
as
there's
well.
like 10 or something scattered around. Yeah.
I feel like it's adequate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Nice.
always nice a little bit more, but I feel like it's adequate. One of the good things with travel is I do get to kind of whenever I'm out on the road, if I'm working on a Thursday or Friday, normally I'll just spend Saturday and Sunday out wherever I am. I like camping. I have a couple of hobbies that I do, so I try to incorporate my hobbies into my work stuff as well. So if I'm up in Albuquerque and there's a con and I'm working and there's a happens to be a concert this letter or something, I try to make it to that. If I'm out somewhere where there's like hiking or camping opportunities, I usually spend one of my days like on the weekend just camping before I come home. So I would say that like even my normal weekends become little mini vacations because of my travel schedule. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, totally.
And
And
then
this is like, yeah,
yeah,
go for it.
yeah, work-life balance. It, I'd say that mine is really good because I don't have a set schedule generally. I know like if you're an academic instructor or faculty, you're having to teach your classes and you have that expectation because of like the clientele that I work with and like the I work on other people's schedules. So I do work a lot of the time in non-work hours, right? Because if there's
Mm.
farmers and ranchers and they're coming to a learning how to do balance sheets and income statements workshop, it's not going to be during the day. It's going to be 6:30 to 8:30 at night outside of their schedule. So I do quite a bit of things that are outside of normal work hours, but they're not they're not on a regular schedule. So it's kind of nice. I'm flexible,
Yeah, you
but
get to
also
sleep in the
sometimes
next
I have to,
day.
yeah, but sometimes I have to, drive drive a few hours to go do a workshop and then come back home on the same day. So it's not always great, but it works out to be a pretty good work-life balance. Um,
Nice,
yeah.
nice. All right, what do you not like about your job?
I'm not sure if I dislike that many things about my job. I really like I've been I didn't, whenever you start a new job, you might not know everybody you work with. You might not know who your boss is or how they're going to be. And so mine was interesting because whenever I first started this position, we did not have a department head. We had an interim. So it was like somebody from a different department kind of just like checking in on us every once in a while. And so it was an entire year that I went without having a real boss. I kind of knew what my duties were and what my responsibilities were, but I didn't have anybody checking on me for a while. So I actually didn't like that in some ways because I felt that it gave me a lot of freedom to learn about what I wanted to do in the job. But it's nice to have somebody that gives you a little bit more focus, especially when it comes to a our college has like some specific goals. And because I was a new employee, I didn't have a lot of oversight. Sometimes I kind of felt like I was just like wandering around aimlessly and always doing something like pretty productive, but it would have been nice. It's nice to have it's like a leader in your department where they're telling you, this is like our short-term, medium-term, long-term goals, and I'll check in on you, and we'll discuss how you're doing along the way. And I didn't really have that for for years, so I would say that was the thing I liked the least. Was I kind of felt kind of aimless for a while. Luckily, I was on the right track, so I didn't have to really adjust after that. Um, but yeah, if you get I like having a little bit of structure in my life and expectations for what I'm supposed to do. So um, yeah, what
Yeah, that's
I would not like to be in charge of everything on my own. Or else,
yeah,
might
yeah,
not be
yeah.
useful.
It's like you don't realize. Well, it's one of those situations where you don't quite realize how helpful it is until it's gone. You're like sometimes, yeah. So nice. And different people have different relationships with that, of course. So it's useful to know, or even just here as a student, right? That if you're in a position and you're like, oh, I don't know if I know what I'm doing, it might not be you. It might be that like there's something in the structure, like an interim, and they're also figuring it out at the same time as you. And so um that my guess is you resolved that with some communication, and then as things changed you just kept communicating. Is that that would be my guess is what happened.
Yeah, I mean everything's good now. We got somebody here that he's a great leader and hasn't really changed. It hasn't changed what I do. It just kind of reaffirmed that I was like again, I thought I was like wandering around aimlessly trying to learn this and do this and publish a paper about this without anybody saying like, oh, that's the right thing to do. So it all worked out in the end. But I have I will say that I've had other jobs where I really disliked them. There was just a bad fit. Um, and, and I worked through those as long as I could. I ended up, like quitting from one that was just like a really bad fit. And then just as your life goes on, things change. So sometimes you reevaluate what is important, like, you know, money versus free time, something really challenging versus something that you can be more creative with. So, as you go through life, like I would say, don't expect to stay in the same career for your entire life. Most people change them quite a bit. I know I already have like three times in like since I graduated from my undergrad. So yeah, military to working in a big multinational company doing sales to do like flipping houses. And so I was like basically did construction for a few years and then back to academia. So I've gone through like a long journey and I'd say move on from the things that really don't fit well because there might be something that like totally unexpected that comes your way.
Awesome. Okay, enough about not liking your job. What do you do on your favorite days?
My favorite days. I would say most of my favorite days are not on the office. They are out doing stuff, and I love being in front of an audience and teaching. So I really do like doing in person teaching. So that gives me like a lot of satisfaction, especially when I think I know what I'm so that's cool. I love going to seminars and workshops where I get to learn stuff, or colleges where I get to sit and learn something new. I would say that so teaching on one side and the other side being like a professional student. And I think that I think it's especially in agriculture, I see that a lot of people do take those opportunities to be part of like if you're growing alfalfa, for example, you're not just doing it all by yourself. You have like the New Mexico Hay Growers Association, and they are going to have resources for you can go talk to them and say like, hey, this is I have this pest problem. Like, can you help me out? Or you go to the conferences and you learn about regenerative practices, or you learn about new science when it comes to pest management. You learn new stuff about soil management. You do learn about new things about new markets to sell to. So I think it's kind of cool that they even if you're in agriculture, a lot of people aren't just they're not just farmers or ranchers sitting on the farm or ranch. They're really going out. They're trying to like be better business people, be better like conservators of the land. And so I like learning that stuff myself. And it's also cool to see those people that like are farmers or ranchers, like that's what they do for a living and they're still out there. So it gives me a lot of like my favorite days are like interacting with those people where I'm like, I'm glad that I did because it's hard. Farming and ranching is hard. So like I'm glad that I understand it. And I get to like see what the challenges are and maybe hopefully provide some support for that in whatever way I can. So yeah, I'd say my favorite days are like learning and then possibly like providing tools for people that could make their businesses better.
That's
On the
awesome.
professional side, on my personal side, my favorite days like taking my dogs for a walk and playing music and going to a nice restaurant, hiking, backpacking, hanging out with my friends, going to a concert.
Yeah, and having time to do that without feeling stressed out, right? Like those matter, go together. Yeah, nice. Okay, this is my last official question, and we can go wherever we want. If you were going to hire someone to help you in your work, what would you look for in an applicant?
Um, I would say that one of the most important things for my job is so I'm expected to have like if I were to say like take on an apprentice or somebody or get a if I had some funding to hire a undergraduate or a graduate research assistant or whatever you call them an intern whatever it is. I would definitely want somebody that has really good writing abilities. Because I think at the end, especially for like me, I can go out and I can do a lot of workshops and stuff. One of the things that I would look for in somebody to help me would be somebody to help create products that are like that are well written resources and tools for the public that is going to need those things. So somebody with really good writing skills would definitely help. Um, I do like a fair bit of like research, like statistical research, not really hard statistics like I had to do in school, but I have to like understand and comprehend. Whenever I read like an academic paper or something with that. So as somebody with like at least the basic interpretive skills for economic or statistics, but then also be able to like put those into a format that doesn't have those statistics. So like interpret it like a really in-depth study into something that's like a more useful tool for a farmer or rancher that doesn't know statistics. So those would be two really important things. If I had somebody that was like helping me with my job would be the writing skills and the interpretation of the math skills. Um,
Nice. And that, yeah, that seems like sometimes when we educate students, we're educating them to be able to like produce the statistics, but it's really nice to hear that if you can understand it, but maybe you don't want to do the R, the coding or the R coding or whatever yourself, but as long as you've gotten far enough to really understand it and be able to interpret it, um, that you don't actually have to go do statistics for the rest of
I
your
don't do
life.
anything as hard as like the classes I took, like econometrics 1 and 2 and applied statistics and those kinds of things. I very rarely really use those in my job, but I do have to be able to understand them and interpret them. So like I'm not expected, at least as an extension person, to
Yeah.
do any like real research, but I do have to do an interpretation of it. And I think that I'd say that a lot of jobs you're not going to necessarily be using, yeah, like you said, like those skills. So maybe it's like some basic coding skills. I do like a lot. I do some stuff in GIS,
Mm.
and I'll
Oh
do
yeah.
like actually GIS is something that's gotten me pretty far in my career is just knowing GIS. As an economist, especially, there's not a lot of geospatial economic people that can do geospatial economics or like or even understand what it is. Right? So that's gotten me pretty far, having that one specific skill. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes just having one super duper good skill, and it could be coding,
Mm-hmm.
because we do have, turning data into visualizations is like really important. So that would be maybe another kind of like interpretation, is taking like spreadsheets and tables and turning them into like a like a pie chart or a bar graph or something like that. It's just like fun to look at and like easy to understand. Super important skill to have. Um, and then um, yeah, and then just depending on where if you're gonna be working with people, you have to have like at least some charisma and personality, and like you can be an introvert possibly, but it's really hard to interact with like an audience of like salt of the earth type people if you can't go and like talk to them. If you're just gonna be sending emails to farmers and ranchers, I don't think you're going to get as much traction as if you can go out there and like be in the field, or even in a conference, and like speak face to face with them. So yeah, having some like communication skills, like personal communication skills, is really important. Um, Probably especially with this demographic, much more than if you're in a super tech world where you can just email and chat with people and have like a perfectly fine professional relationship. Agriculture, I think it's a lot harder to do that. I think you have to be able to, you can't be scared of going out and talking to people, and especially getting into places where it's like it's there on their turf. Because then you'll get a lot, there'll be a lot of barriers that get taken down when you're like actually out there and like on a field, or somewhere where you're able to talk about things concretely, and not just in like theoretically. So yeah, people skills and personal communication skills is pretty important.
Yeah, and listening to people, I think also, right? It's like uh yeah, the I think the super I personally identify as an extrovert, which is really helpful for some of the things you said. And then like when I go out with the person who is quieter and like they're so deeply listening, sometimes that can be really helpful. So I think as long as you can engage with people in a meaningful way, yeah, it's like making sure that you're prioritizing that um, can be so helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, really, it's
Right.
as an economist or extension economist or business development person, really like our main goal is to support farmers and ranchers, or the related businesses. So that could be processing, that could be anybody in the agriculture supply chain,